Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. Guys, I hope everyone is doing okay tonight. Wow, Jesus Christ, it's almost 3 in the morning. Alright, so let's go to the second part of the one I want to show. So this is Trey Gowdy examining Shifty Strzok. Peter Strzok being the one that essentially allowed Clinton to get off, or essentially assisted Comey in gutting the language, allowing Clinton to get off, while at the same token also working on the Trump investigation and getting Trump on, letting one off, getting one on. The wild part about this is the text messages going back to his lover gets across what seems to be somebody who is a particular political ideology, or at the very least has a political bias, and pretending as if that bias in no way affected his decision making as he was doing that investigation. I think it is a little shallow thinking. He's being cross-examined by Republicans who are very well clear that they let Clinton off. They know that he let Clinton off. And his thing is the dog and pony show to try to get away with people saying, okay, the FBI. Look, he's tarnished the image of the FBI. And it's not just him, it's also Comey. The fact that Clinton walked is a travesty of justice. It's a travesty of justice. Meaning, if there was somebody else, if there was any other random person, that person would have been put in prison. They would have thrown away the key. The guy who took a picture of himself on the nuclear sub went to prison. That guy went to prison. That guy's suing them right now, saying it is unfair that you let Hillary Clinton off as she was allowing information to be on a private server. Now, again, if this was anyone else, they would have thrown the book, they would have put him in prison, they would have put him under the prison. Hillary Clinton walked. She lied constantly. She still walked. Comey, you could hardly say he did an investigation, seeing as he wrote up the paper letting her go before even talking to the person that he was supposedly investigating. Loretta Lynch telling Comey to talk about the case in a way that favored the Clinton camp. Well, that in and of itself is pretty amazing, that this edifice of the government is supposed to be completely impartial is telling somebody who's working for the federal, the FBI, to talk about the case in a way of one of the other campaigns. Comey himself said he was working in the world where he assumed Hillary Clinton was going to win. It's not up for you to assume one way or the other. It's for you to do your goddamn job. Doing your goddamn job, if you were using the law equitably, in the same way you would apply it to me or any other random person, she would be in prison. That's the thing that's getting at people's craw. When you ask most people about whether or not they thought Hillary Clinton should have been indicted, most people says yes. When you look at the polling, they say yeah, they think she's guilty. Or at the very least, they think she should have been indicted. Comey, letting her go, runs afoul of what the public senses to be most likely true, that he let her walk. That they let her walk. While at the same token, this guy who has a clear preference for Clinton, clear stated preference to Clinton as he talked to his lover that was not his wife, was also working on the Trump case. If there was no bias in this, why did you dismiss Strzok from the case? Why did you dismiss the other guy? I can't even think of his name, McCabe, but the one who got fired and may actually get prosecuted. There needs to be a second investigator on this case, meaning going for the Clinton email case. There needs to be a second investigator because even the Inspector General himself said that there was no way to know whether or not a fair and honest investigation had taken place because of the messages and the communications that was taking place around the people involved with the case itself. There was bias. There was bias all through it. And it looks pretty hokey that you end up letting one woman off and then all of a sudden getting the political candidate hooked onto something. I'm just saying, this looks problematic, to say the least. How do you let one off that is so clearly guilty, while at the same token, and when I mean guilty, I'm basing this based on the FBI's own standard. Brian Nishimura, Comey gets up and gives this horrible thing, extending the standard of the law. Brian Nishimura was locked up prior. There's an article in Zero Hedge that goes through this and details what the law actually says and how Hillary Clinton essentially flagrantly broke that law, where Comey was adding intent to something where intent had nothing to do with it. Intent had nothing to do with it. So let's take a look at Comey being prosecuted first by Trey Gowdy. And then I'm going to go and show Comey, Trey Gowdy talking to Peter Strzok. First, I'm going to show Comey because I want you to see. I want you to see this first, because I think this is instructive in regards to, I guess you can say, the larger context of what this is about. I mean, ultimately, the Federal Bureau of Investigation's investigative department of our government is supposed to be impartial. That supposedly impartial agency was doing an investigation on one Hillary Clinton. In that investigation on one Hillary Clinton, it was carried out in an odd way. It was carried out in a way not by the states themselves, meaning this kind of devolved way. It was done in a top-down fashion. That in of itself is a little weird. I'm saying there were certain anomalies associated with the way that investigation had taken place. Person at the center of this, Comey, I want him to be cross-examined first. And the second part of this, meaning the way that Gowdy is getting at this, is related to some degree to the way Comey is being cross-examined here. So let's take a look at this. Both of these guys are going to get cross-examined. I want you to see Comey first because I want you to see the larger context. And then I'm going to switch over to Strzok, who was working under Comey.
Good morning, Director Comey. Secretary Clinton said she never sent or received any classified information over her private email. Was that true?
Our investigation found that there was classified information sent.
So it was not true?
Right. That's what I said.
Okay. Well, I'm looking for a little shorter answer so you and I are not here quite as long. Secretary Clinton said there was nothing marked classified on her emails either sent or received. Was that true?
That's not true. There were a small number of portion markings on, I think, 3 of the documents.
Secretary Clinton said, I did not email any classified material to anyone on my email. There is no classified material. Was that true?
There was classified material emailed.
Secretary Clinton said she used just one device. Was that true?
She used multiple devices during the 4 years of her term as Secretary of State.
Secretary Clinton said all work-related emails were returned to the State Department. Was that true?
No, we found work-related emails, thousands, that were not returned.
Secretary Clinton said neither she nor anyone else deleted work-related emails from her personal account. Was that true?
That's a harder one to answer. We found traces of work-related emails on devices or in Slack space, whether they were deleted or whether when a server was changed out, something happened to them. There's no doubt that there were work-related emails that were removed electronically from the email system.
Look, the key point is there were classified information on a server that was not known to anybody at this point. It wasn't even known. But essentially, there was classified information in areas where classified information was not supposed to be stored. Comey himself has said foreign actors has got his hands on classified information based on Hillary Clinton's, what do you want to call it, ignorance, malfeasance, fuck-upness, smugness, whatever word you want to use.
Secretary Clinton said her lawyers read every one of the emails and were overly inclusive. Did her lawyers read the email content individually?
No.
Well, in the interest of time, and because I have a plane to catch tomorrow afternoon, I'm not going to go through any more of the false statements, but I am going to ask you to put on your old hat. False exculpatory statements, they are used for what?
Well, either for a substantive prosecution or for evidence of intent in a criminal prosecution.
Exactly. Intent and consciousness of guilt, right? Is that right?
Right.
Consciousness of guilt and intent. In your old job, you would prove intent, as you just referenced, by showing the jury evidence of a complex scheme that was designed for the very purpose of concealing the public record. And you would be arguing, in addition to concealment, the destruction that you and I just talked about, or certainly the failure to preserve. You would argue all of that under the heading of content. You would also be arguing the pervasiveness of the scheme, when it started, when it ended, and the number of emails, whether they were originally classified or up-classified. You would argue all of that under the heading of intent. You would also probably, under common scheme or plan, argue the burn bags of daily calendar entries or the missing daily calendar entries as a common scheme or plan to conceal. 2 days ago, Director, you said a reasonable person in her position should have known a private email was no place to send and receive classified information. You're right, an average person does know not to do that. This is no average person. This is a former First Lady, a former United States Senator, and a former Secretary of State that the President now contends is the most competent, qualified person to be president since Jefferson. He didn't say that in 2008, but he says it now. She affirmatively rejected efforts to give her a state.gov account. She kept these private emails for almost 2 years and only turned them over to Congress because we found out she had a private email account. So you have a rogue email system set up before she took the oath of office, thousands of what we now know to be classified emails, some of which were classified at the time. One of her more frequent email comrades was in fact hacked, and you don't know whether or not she was. And this scheme took place over a long period of time and resulted in the destruction of public records, and yet you say there is insufficient evidence of intent. You say she was extremely careless, but not intentionally so. You and I both know intent is really difficult to prove. Very rarely do defendants announce, on this date, I intend to break this criminal code section. Just to put everyone on notice, I am going to break the law on this date. It never happens that way. You have to do it with circumstantial evidence. Or if you're Congress and you realize how difficult it is to prove specific intent, you will formulate a statute that allows for gross negligence. My time is out, but this is really important. You mentioned there's no precedent for criminal prosecution. My fear is there still isn't. There's nothing to keep a future Secretary of State or President from this exact same email scheme or their staff. And my real fear is this. It's what the chairman touched upon. This double-track justice system that is rightly or wrongly perceived in this country. That if you are a private in the Army and you email yourself classified information, you will be kicked out. But if you are Hillary Clinton and you seek a promotion to Commander-in-Chief, you will not be. So what I hope you can do today is help the average person, the reasonable person you made reference to, the reasonable person.
If that was anybody else, they would have been prosecuted. I think anybody that's being honest would say the same thing. If that was anybody other than Hillary Clinton, they would have been prosecuted. Or if there was anybody other than Hillary Clinton while Obama was in office and while Loretta Lynch was in office and they had a favorable justice system that was perfectly okay with Hillary Clinton because they wanted her to be the next president of the United States, they would have been thrown under the prison, let alone thrown in prison. This is Gowdy going after Strzok, the one that worked for Comey, and apparently the one that helped change the language, or changing the language in a way that would take it down from a criminal penalty. Let's say it that way.
31st, 2016, you drafted the originating document. You approved the originating document. You were the point of contact on the originating document, and the FBI has represented to Congress that nothing from an investigative standpoint with respect to Russian collusion and the Trump campaign began before July 31st, 2016. But 10 days before the investigation even began, 10 days before you drafted the originating document, approved the originating document, was the point of contact on the originating document, 10 days before the investigation began, which the department you work for says nothing was done before July 31st. You said Trump is a disaster. I have no idea how destabilizing his presidency would be. And because you struggled a couple of weeks ago with a word that I thought had a commonly accepted definition, I'm going to go ahead and give you the definition of destabilizing. The first one kind of is obvious. It's to make unstable. The second one caught my attention, the second dictionary definition. To cause something such as a government to be incapable of functioning or surviving. That's a pretty significant allegation to make 10 days before you even began to investigate someone. So that was before July 31st. I want to ask you in that first week, we'll go ahead and up it to 8 days, between July 31st and August 8th, how many interviews did you conduct related to the alleged collusion between Russia and the Trump campaign?
So, Congressman, as you know, counsel for the FBI, based on the special counsel's equities, has instructed me not to answer questions about the ongoing investigation.
I'm asking for a number.
Russian attempts to interfere.
Agent Strzok, I'm asking for a number. I haven't gotten to the names. How many people had you interviewed between the beginning of it on July 31st and August the 8th? It's an 8-day time period. We're a week into an investigation. How many people had you interviewed?
Congressman, I understand your question. I appreciate it, and I would very much like to answer. But as I've stated, as you know, that counsel of the FBI, based on the special counsel's equities, have directed me not to answer any questions about the ongoing investigation into Russian attempts to interfere.
The gentleman will suspend and the clock will suspend. Mr. Strzok, you are under subpoena and are required to answer the question. Are you objecting to the question? If so, please state your objection.
Mr. Chairman, I object.
The gentleman does not have standing to object. There is no
point of order.
No point of order here. The
Point of order, it should be heard.
gentleman will state his point of order.
My point of order is that intentionally or otherwise, this demand puts Mr. Strzok in an impossible position. He is still an employee of the FBI, and FBI counsel has instructed him not to answer the question.
The gentleman's...
If we have a problem with this policy, we should take it up with the FBI, not badger Mr. Strzok.
The gentleman's point of order is not well taken.
It's right on point.
No, it's not. Mr. Strzok, are you objecting to the question? And if so, please state your objection.
Mr. Chairman, two things. One, I do not believe I am here under subpoena. I believe I am here voluntarily. Second, I will not, based on direction of the FBI to me, based on that, I will not answer that question. Because it goes to matters which are related to the ongoing investigations being undertaken by the special counsel's office.
Mr. Strzok, you have not stated a valid legal basis for not responding to a question directed to you by a member of the United States House of Representatives, and you are overruled.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman.
Let me continue. Your testimony is essential to this hearing and to our oversight and information gathering functions with regard to the actions taken and decisions made by the Department of Justice and the Federal Bureau of Investigation in 2016 and 2017. I am specifically directing you to answer the question in response to our subpoena, notwithstanding your objection.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Strzok, please be advised that you can either comply with the committee's directive to answer the question or refuse to do so, the latter of which will place you at risk of a contempt citation and potential criminal liability.
Point of order.
Do you understand that?
Point of order, Mr. Chairman.
The question is directed to the witness.
And I have a point of order before he answers the question.
The point of order is not well taken until...
You don't know what the point of order is. You can't say it's not well taken.
The point of order, the witness will answer the question.
Mr. Chairman, I raise my point of order, and I insist on it.
What is the point of order?
The United States Attorney's Manual instructs department personnel not to respond to questions about the existence of an ongoing investigation or comment on its nature or progress. In a letter to Congressman John Linder in 2000, referred to as the Linder letter, the department made this policy explicitly applicable to requests from Congress. Quote, although Congress has a clearly legitimate interest in determining how the department enforces statutes, congressional inquiries during the pendency of a matter pose an inherent threat to the integrity of the department's law enforcement and litigation functions, unquote. Therefore, the question being directed at the witness is out of order.
Screw that. Congress is asking a person a question. Congress has oversight capabilities. Congress is saying, we want certain information from you. What is the information? Give us that information. And you invoking some policy that your particular department has come up with, screw that. Look, from the standpoint of Bob Goodlatte, make sure you're able to back up your threats. Meaning, if you're saying you're going to hold him in for contempt for not doing it, hold him in contempt. Here's the catch. I have no sympathy for any of the FBI agents that's being dragged before Congress. Oftentimes, these guys use methods in the same way that Goodlatte is using methods now, saying, if you don't do X, we are going to prosecute you to the fullest extent. So, a person who may be innocent may take 2 years as opposed to getting put on trial for maybe 30 years. These kind of extortion methods. That being said, I already think Strzok's guilty. Strzok is hiding behind this kind of FBI thing. He's not asking him details. He's just saying, how many people did you interview? How many people did you interview? He's trying to get to a point. Strzok doesn't want to answer. He's hiding in this way. And the Democrats are trying to do their best to hide him or to protect him.
The witness's declination to answer it as against the instructions of the FBI pursuant to FBI policy, which is necessary so as not to allow us to subvert an ongoing criminal investigation, he is right. And he should not answer the question.
The gentleman has not stated a valid point of
order.
order.
The ruling of the chair in that case.
Nonetheless, the United States Supreme Court has recognized that it is unquestionably the duty of all citizens to cooperate with the Congress in its efforts to obtain the facts needed for intelligent legislative action. It is their unremitting obligation to respect the dignity of the Congress and its committees and to testify fully with respect to matters within the province of proper investigation.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman, you know, or we all know, that if we were to ask a question of a witness about a military secret, if we were to ask him, how does the H-bomb work? He could not answer that question. This is the same thing.
Are you serious? Are you serious? That's your Democratic Party. That's your Democratic Party. Listen, did you hear what he said? That essentially asking him how many people did you interview is equivalent to someone asking a military officer about the working secrets of the H-bomb. Are you serious? Look, asking Peter Strzok how many people he interviewed is not the same thing as asking somebody how do they build the H-bomb. That is a very different thing. If you don't know that there's a different thing, I think something is wrong with you. Nadler, your Democratic Party, that was the best that he could come up with. That was a person who was reaching for anything to throw in front to try to protect Strzok from answering those questions. That's what that was. That is comical and that's ridiculous. And yes, that is ridiculous as it sounds. If you asked a military, I can't believe you said that. That's beyond stupid. That's stupid on steroids. That's stupid with a jetpack. If you're asking Strzok, how many people did you interview between this particular time period? How many people did you interview? You're talking about destabilizing the presidency, all right? How many people did you interview before that time period? And the Democratic Party flip out, protecting him, not even wanting him to answer. Just give us a number. Give us a number. And in order to protect him, just to be clear, in order to protect him from answering that question, he is bringing up some kind of, thing with the FBI policy, but then goes to this thing of the H-bomb as if how many people did you interview is somehow synonymous with how did you build the H-bomb? How did you build the H-bomb? Wow, that's an amazing jump. That's a remarkable leap. Yeah, that's a leap and a miss.
That is a classification issue, not an issue of whether or not this is a valid question for which...
I appeal the ruling of the chair.
There,
He has ruled that it's not a point of order.
That is not a ruling. Mr. Strzok?
Mr. Chairman, I insist on my point of order, and I insist on
Mr. Strzok.
appealing the ruling of the chair.
Mr. Strzok, knowing the advice that
Point
I
of
have
order,
given
Mr.
you-
Chairman. Point of order. I believe there's a point of order that's been raised, and you've ruled we have a right now to answer Mr. Nadler's.
It is not a valid point of order. The
And I
chair
appeal
has
can't just
already...
repress it,
on
Mr.
that
Chairman,
question,
because you don't-
on that ruling.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Strzok.
Mr. Chairman, I appeal the ruling of the chair that you have just made on that, on whether the...
You have not stated a valid point of
And
order.
that is your ruling, and I appeal it.
That is not an appealable...
Point of order.
I
Yes, it
appeal
is,
the
Mr.
decision
Chairman.
that that's not
Appealing the ruling
appealable.
of the chair is exactly what he's requesting. He's appealing it. That requires a vote to either sustain it or overrule it.
The gentleman from New York has not cited a rule of the House that is being violated. Therefore, it is not a point of order.
That's your
appeal
ruling.
that
He's
ruling of the
appealed it.
chair.
Mr. Chairman, is it not appropriate to also interject the attorney-client privilege, which cannot be overridden, and is a rule of the House to the
the
extent that
gentlewoman
witnesses
will
have the right
suspend-
to an attorney-client privilege in this House?
Mr.
And that is what this witness is asserting,
Mr.
attorney-client
Strzok,
privilege, and
Mr.
he has been
Strzok,
advised not
Mr.
to answer.
Doesn't this make it look like he's more guilty? Is it just me? It just seems like they're fighting really hard to prevent him from answering questions. If Peter Strzok was as innocent as they're trying to say Peter Strzok is, why are they fighting so hard for the basics of an answer? Don't you want to also get to the bottom of whether or not there was a fair investigation into the email investigation? I would prefer to know rather than not. And one of the people who were instrumental in that, or who was at the center of what I consider to be somewhat of a cover-up, was Strzok. It was Strzok. Now, you have all of these Democrats throwing their body on the fire. Let's see if they fight like this when they're going against trying to stop Kavanaugh. They damn sure didn't fight like this when they were approving Gorsuch. Let the guy talk. Let Strzok speak for himself. Why on earth does him answering these questions bother you so?
The gentleman will suspend. The gentleman has not raised the attorney-client privilege. He has said that he's been instructed by the FBI not to answer the question. Now,
By lawyers.
he knows the advice I have just given him. If he would like, I'll restate it. But knowing this, will you answer the committee's question as directed, or do you refuse to answer the committee's question?
Point of parliamentary
appealing
inquiry,
the ruling
Mr.
of the
Chairman.
chair that
Point
my
of parliamentary
order was
inquiry.
not in order.
Point of parliamentary inquiry, Mr. Chairman.
The gentleman from South Carolina has the time. A parliamentary inquiry is not in order during the gentleman's time. The chair is instructing the witness to answer the question, and the question to you is,
Mr. Chairman.
will you answer the committee's question as directed, or do you refuse to answer the committee's question?
Mr. Chairman, I move to adjourn.
Second.
You're not recognized for that purpose.
Mr. Chairman, I think you have no choice but to recognize such a motion.
I do not have.
Are you just going to make up rules as we go along? Is that-
The motion is not in order during the time controlled by the gentleman from South Carolina.
I appeal that ruling of the chair.
Mr. Strzok, will you
Chairman, I
answer?
appeal your ruling of the chair that my motion to adjourn is not in order.
The gentleman is not in order.
That may be, but I appeal your ruling.
The gentleman is not recognized. Knowing this, will you answer the committee's question as directed, or do you refuse to answer the committee's question?
Mr. Chairman, as you know, counsel for the FBI has directed me not to answer questions about the ongoing investigation. As you also know, counsel for the FBI is sitting here behind me. May I consult with them?
You may consult with your own counsel.
But I may not consult with the FBI's counsel?
Only with your own counsel.
Mr. Chairman, there's no basis for that. He can consult with the FBI counsel. He's an FBI employee.
The gentleman is not recognized.
And the chairman is not being proper.
The chairman is being proper.
witness can't be directed not to confer with his attorney.
The FBI is not his attorney. His attorney is seated behind him. If he wishes
He's an
to consult
employee
with
of
his
the
attorney,
FBI,
as he's already done, he may do so.
And his attorney may consult with the FBI attorney?
Isn't the privilege that of the FBI, and shouldn't the FBI counsel be solicited on that point?
Just take that over right now. Let Trey have it. Let's get this out. Let's just get this out, and then we'll go back to Mr. Gowdy.
Mr. Chairman, my counsel has reiterated that counsel for the FBI has directed that I may not answer that question.
Mr. Strzok, in a moment we will continue with the hearing, but based on your refusal to answer the question, at the conclusion of the day, we will be recessing the hearing, and you will be subject to recall to allow the committee to consider proceeding with a contempt citation.
A point of order, Mr. Chairman. Will the committee also consider contempt for Mr. Bannon, who refused to answer Mr. Gowdy's questions when he was actually under subpoena?
That is not a proper point of order in this hearing.
Parliamentary inquiry.
Mr. Gowdy, do you remember
Parliamentary inquiry.
The time is controlled by the gentleman from
Parliamentary inquiry.
A parliamentary inquiry is
Mr.
not
Bannon
in order
wouldn't answer your
when the
questions
gentleman
under subpoena,
from
Mr.
South
Gowdy.
Carolina controls the time.
Agent Strzok, just so the record's clear, because it's been a little while, I didn't ask you the content of those interviews. I didn't ask you the names of who you interviewed. I asked you whether or not you interviewed anyone from July the 31st until August the 8th. And I find it interesting that the FBI will tell us no interviews were conducted before July 31st. That apparently doesn't impact an ongoing probe. But between July 31st and August 8th, it does. Here's the good news. I already know the answer to it. I went and looked at the file. The first interview that I can find is on August the 11th of 2016, which is 11 days after it began, which makes me wonder, on August the 6th, so you hadn't interviewed anyone, you're investigating this alleged Russian collusion with the Trump campaign. You're the lead investigator. You originated the investigation. You're the point of contact. You drafted the document. And here you are before you've interviewed a single solitary witness saying F Trump. Then that same day, your colleague, Lisa Page, wrote, "Maybe you're meant to protect the country from that menace." And you responded, "I can protect the country at many levels." We're not even a week into an investigation that you originated, approved, were the contact for. You hadn't interviewed a single solitary soul until August 11th, and you're already promising to protect the country from that menace, Donald Trump. And then on August the 8th, you still hadn't interviewed anyone. You're 8 days into your Russian collusion with the Trump campaign investigation, and you got another text from your colleague, Lisa Page. "Trump's not ever going to become president, right? Right?" And you replied, "No, he's not. We'll stop it." By the time you promised to stop him from becoming president on August the 8th, how many interviews had you conducted?
Mr. Gowdy, so two answers to that. One, with regard to how many interviews had or had not been conducted, I have been directed by counsel for the FBI not to answer that question. Second, sir, I think it's important to take those texts in the context of how they were written and what they meant.
And someone may ask you that question, Agent Strzok, but I didn't. I asked you how many people you interviewed before you wrote it. If you want to get into context, let one of my other colleagues do that with you. Here's what I want to know. Who's the he and he's not?
He is then candidate Trump.
So when you said, no, Donald Trump's not, in connection with the question, going to become president, what's the it?
Chairman Gowdy.
We'll stop it.
Chairman Gowdy, that text needs to be taken in the context of
I'm asking, look, if you want to have a debate over a two-letter word, we're going to have to do that some other time. What and who did you mean by it?
Mr. Gowdy, as I've stated, that text was written late at night in shorthand.
I don't care when it was written. I don't care whether it was longhand, cursive. I don't care about any of that. I want to know what it meant, Agent Strzok.
It would be his candidacy for the presidency, and my sense that the American population would not vote him into office.
Right. Well, we hadn't gotten to the will yet.
Well, I'm trying to cut to the chase.
From my understanding, Trey Gowdy used to be a lawyer. He used to be a prosecutor. He is essentially establishing one item after the next as he builds this particular argument. What do you mean by he? Who is he? He's Donald Trump. All right. What do you mean by it? Oh, he doesn't want to answer it. Hey, well, you must understand those texts were sent late at night. I don't care whether they were sent late at night. Those texts were sent shorthand. I don't give a shit about the shorthand. I'm asking you, what does it mean? It means, it's when he's running. I mean, candidate Trump. You mean the election. It stands for the election. He will not win it. Yes. And God is like, it's not that hard. It's not that hard. It's just called honesty. Let's keep going.
Explain the text.
The will is the American people. Is that right? That's your testimony. The will stop it. You were speaking on behalf of the American people. Is that correct?
Mr. Gowdy, what my testimony is and what I said during extensive asking of this question during my prior interview is, I don't recall writing that text.
Are you denying writing the text?
What I can tell you is that text in no way suggested that I or the FBI would take any action to influence the candidacy of
Agent Strzok, that is a fantastic answer to a question nobody asked.
Yeah, Mr. Gowdy, you asked what I meant.
My question to you is
Chairman,
the
is the witness
will.
going to be permitted to answer the question being posed?
After the conclusion of Mr. Gowdy's questions, if there is a question that he has not had the opportunity to answer, he will be given additional time to do that. The witness will.
Well, you look forward to that.
Mr. Gowdy's now, and he will not be interrupted by others.
So your testimony.
His time has
a couple of
expired,
weeks
Mr.
ago,
Chairman.
Your
By
testimony
2.5
a couple of
minutes.
weeks. It's going to be tough for me to get through it if I keep getting interrupted. Your testimony a couple of weeks ago was the we meant the American people, which I found confusing because on November the 7th, which is the day before the election, you said this. You were concerned that those same American people that you were speaking on behalf of might actually elect Donald Trump president. So you said, OMG, this is effing terrifying. I think we know what effing means. I'm pretty sure we have OMG down too. What was terrifying about those same American people you trusted to stop him in August, not stopping him in November? What was so terrifying about that, Agent Strzok?
Mr. Gowdy, I do not have a copy of the transcript. We have not been provided that transcript.
It's your text. It's not the transcript, it's your text.
God, he's a shifty asshole. He's a shifty ass. I don't recall writing the text, but I will tell you that despite not recalling writing that particular text that I wrote with my own hands, with my own cell phone, despite not recalling that, I'm telling you that it is not what you're saying it is. I don't recall, and even if I did do it, I'm not guilty. Let's keep going.
Mr. Gowdy, what I would say in that is, one, I was not referring to the American electorate at all. The American electorate, I respect in their decisions, and their right to vote is absolutely a cornerstone of our democracy. So at no time did I insult or call into question the judgment or the power of the American electorate. What I was expressing in that text is my personal belief and my personal sense of how I saw and what I believed in the potential upcoming administration.
And see, that's what I find so confounding, because in August you blamed the we on the American people, that the American people would stop it, because you don't want it to be you and Lisa Page.
Mr. Chairman,
and you don't want it to be the FBI.
Are we not given 5 minutes to answer questions? We have indulged this harassment 9 minutes.
The chair,
the Judiciary and the Oversight Committee. I thought
the gentleman will suspend. The chair, in agreement with the ranking members of both committees, agreed that there would be liberality in the questioning by the chairman and the ranking members of each committee. The gentleman will continue.
What I find confounding,
then, Mr. Chairman,
Agent
we
Strzok,
expect that liberality on every one of our questionings.
What I find confounding, Agent Strzok, is you were counting on the American people. That was the we you referenced in August when you said, we'll stop it. But the American people didn't stop it. He actually won. So then we go to March of 2017, and you're already talking longingly about him resigning. And then we go to the day that Special Counsel Mueller, well, before we go to that, that's March of 2017. March of 2016, you wrote, God, Hillary should win 100 million to 0. And I'm assuming Hillary would be former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton?
That's correct.
All right. In March of 2016, weren't you investigating her for potential mishandling of classified information?
We were.
Had you interviewed her yet?
No.
Had you interviewed more than 30 other witnesses that wound up being interviewed?
I would have to check the case file, but I'll take your representation.
Well, if she had said something incriminating in your interview that took place months later of her, would she have won $100 million to zero then?
Likely not, no.
Well, then why wouldn't you wait until the investigation was over before you have her the nominee and winning a general election against an opponent that hadn't even been named yet? $100 million to zero, Agent Strzok? That's how bad she should win?
Mr. Gowdy, those personal expressions of my observing the political process of the presidential primaries had no bearing on my actions of any investigation, to include the investigation of Secretary Clinton.
You couldn't think of
or anybody else. Sir,
you couldn't think of a single person that would not vote for Hillary Clinton for president? $100 million to zero, Agent Strzok?
Sir, that was clearly hyperbole, which I...
Well, let's say it was hyperbole. Let's divide it by 10. How about we say it was hyperbolic and divide it by 10? 100 million divided by 10, I'm pretty sure is 10 million. Zero divided by 10 is still zero. You couldn't think of a single solitary person that was going to vote for her for president before you interviewed her and while you were supposed to be investigating her.
Congressman, clearly that's not the truth. Clearly, I could envision millions of Americans who are likely and did vote for then candidate.
Well, you wrote it.
My point, sir.
Did you write it? Did you write that text?
I did write that, sir.
Okay. Were you under duress?
Political expression engaging in hyperbole.
Were you under duress?
Asked and answered over and over again.
The gentlewoman will suspend. The gentleman from South Carolina controls the time.
All right, we're going to go into one other time period. May 17th, 2017, Bob Mueller is appointed. Your friend Jim Comey's been fired. He's already leaked the memos to his law professor friend, and Mueller is special counsel. Do you remember how long it took for you to start talking about impeachment after Bob Mueller was appointed?
I don't, sir.
1 day. 1 day. And you were talking about impeachment. And for anyone who may have missed it the day after his appointment, Agent Strzok, you did it again 5 days later. Now, how many interviews had you done as part of the special counsel team within the first 5 days of his appointment?
Sir, again, same answer as before. I can't get into details.
Right, and the answer is also the...
He's working on the Hillary Clinton investigation. We know at this point that he was instrumental in getting down the language with regards to the Clinton camp. We also know that he was a Clinton supporter and was clearly in the camp of Hillary Clinton, and he was talking about the woman who was going to be president while at the exact same time he was investigating the person who he said was going to be president of the United States. On the second hand, he gets on and starts investigating Donald Trump. And within a day of investigating Donald Trump, he's talking about either Trump stepping down or impeachment. Fast forward a few days later again, he's still talking about this thing of getting Trump hooked onto something. He was the person who was instrumental in getting all of this stuff started. What Gowdy is saying here is not wrong. This stinks. This stinks to high heaven.
The same, it's zero. No interviews have been done.
I don't know if that's true or not.
No interviews had been done by August the 8th when you're talking about stopping him and how terrifying it would be for him to win and how you can protect the country. And no interviews have been done before you're talking about impeachment of the president. But no wonder
Chairman,
Bob Mueller kicked you off of the investigation, Agent Strzok. My question is, if you were kicked off when you read the text, shouldn't you have been kicked off when you wrote them?
Not at all.
Well, it wasn't the discovery of your text, Mr. Strzok. It was the existence of your bias that got you kicked off.
No, Mr. Gowdy, it wasn't. I do not have bias. My personal opinions in no way.
Well, then why did you get kicked off? Why'd you get kicked off?
Mr. Gowdy, my understanding of why I was kicked off was that based on an understanding of those texts and the perception that they might create.
Well, hang on a second, Agent Strzok. Hang on a second. Perception.
Integrity.
You're saying it was the perception. There are 13 Democrats on the special counsel probe, including one who went to what he hoped was a victory party. That's a perception problem, too. They weren't kicked off. You were. Why were you kicked off?
Mr. Gowdy, I cannot speak to Special Counsel Mueller's
How long
staffing
did you talk to
decisions
him?
or the reasons why he did or didn't.
How long did you talk to him when he let you go?
Witness answer the question.
Witness will be afforded the opportunity to answer the question if there is a question he wants to answer after Mr. Gowdy's time.
My recollection, it was a short meeting, somewhere between 15 to 30 minutes, probably around 15 minutes.
And your testimony is Bob Mueller did not kick you off because of the content of your text. He kicked you off because of some appearance that he was worried about.
My testimony, what you asked and what I responded to, was that he kicked me off because of my bias. I'm stating to you, it is not my understanding that he kicked me off because of any bias, that it was done based on the appearance. If you want to represent what you said accurately, I'm happy to answer that question, but I don't appreciate what was originally said being changed.
I don't give a damn what you appreciate, Agent Strzok. I don't appreciate having an FBI agent with an unprecedented level of animus working on 2 major investigations during 2016.
The chair recognizes.
Agreed. Yes. Yes. I don't give a damn what you. Yes, I love it. I love that. Fucking A, I love that. That was awesome. That was awesome. Democrats are pathetic. They're pathetic. Strzok should have had to answer those questions. Anybody who's being honest with themselves knows that what this guy was talking about when he was working on both cases, the Hillary case and then the Trump case, it is easily understandable that if a person is working on a case and they're saying to themselves that, oh my God, Donald Trump is going to eat babies and kick puppies and I need to be the one who protects the country from it. Yes, he can work into his head this idea that what he's doing is somehow right or what he's doing is somehow necessary. Yes, that is true. That is not far-fetched in the least. Especially since he worked on both cases. Yeah, Trey Gowdy's point is right. You're working on a case with a tremendous amount of bias. And he's talking about, I have no bias. I have no bias. Everybody has biases. You can't even own up to the fact that you got them. And you're running a case where that's not really even an investigation. When we're talking about the Hillary Clinton thing, he's asking him, how many people did you interview? How many people did you interview? How many people did you interview in that investigation? You're talking about the woman who's going to be president. You're interviewing her for essentially a criminal case. And then in the other case, you're talking about the guy that's going to be, the end of America. But there's no bias in the situation at all. I'm just doing this as an FBI agent. Whatever. This guy's a hack. He's a corrupt hack at that. Video sounds always too low. Trudy, let's see. I have it turned up, Trudy, as far as I know. It's turned up to 100 and the video is turned up to 100. It may just be that particular video may just be low. I'm stuck with whatever the sound is on the video that I'm playing. So if I'm playing a video from, let's say, like C-SPAN in this case, there's some that are louder than others. But yeah, let's see who's here. So you're saying the First Amendment used to beat Hillary? Skip Rock. The sound of the video is fine. Oprah 2020. That's awesome. The volume dropped when the people were talking off the mic. Oh yeah. Well, if you notice, the person who was in charge, his mic was much lower than the volume of the other people's in the mic. There's more evidence of collusion with Saudi Arabia and Israel than Russia. Yes, unsanctioned studios. Yes, there is. Yes, there is. The video clips are much lower in volume than your mic. Oh, that may be true. My volume, I can up my mic. The volume for my mic is a little bit different than the volumes for the videos because volumes and videos are determined by the video clip, not by me in this case. I have mine turned all the way up to 100, so this may be the video itself. The video is at the bottom, I believe. Yeah, the Strzok video is at the bottom, so you guys can look at it for yourselves. The FBI guy looked fucking creepy. Yeah, Luther Dean, he does look creepy. He does look creepy. I think that's the look you get when you're lying through your teeth. Badger rips GOP colleagues. His Strzok hearing brings out posters of guilty Trump campaigners. There's somebody else. As the bias impact after the election, Strzok wrote, we should have done something. Yeah, Trudy. I mean, this is kind of what I mean. when you're looking at his text comes across a particular way. His text comes across a particular way. Strzok loves Hillary. We should have done something. Skip Rock. Trump colluded with the Jews, therefore all interactions with Jews must be viewed as suspicions. That's hilarious. Jamal should have. Oh, you're trying to say that he's didn't do anything. You're trying to say that Strzok said we should have gotten involved. That text could have been self-serving for all I knew. All I know is there are a lot of texts leading up to this idea of Strzok being instrumental in the process, in both processes. I would have to check the time frame and everything else on that particular text, but I wouldn't be surprised if some of these texts were self-serving, or at the very least after the fact. After the fact. And by the way, what Gowdy was asking him was straightforward. You're coming here saying there is no bias. Right off the bat, that doesn't seem true. Everybody has bias. I can even see if he comes and says, look, I wanted Hillary Clinton to win that race. Yes, I had bias associated with it, but it didn't influence my actions. Here's the thing. Bias will influence your actions. Whether or not you give her the benefit of the doubt, whether or not you don't give him the benefit of the doubt, those things play into the decisions that people make. Take this out the realm of politics for the moment. Take it to the realm of race. A cop that harbors certain feelings about other demographics, let's say blacks or something to that effect. Will that influence his decisions from the standpoint of whether he's dealing with somebody who's black as opposed to whether he's dealing with somebody who's white? Of course, the answer is yes. That cop is going to be more harsh on somebody who's black as opposed to somebody who's white, even if he does not necessarily experience it to himself as being racist. I'm trying to separate this from what's taking place from the standpoint of the Republicans, Democrats, and all this other stuff. I'm trying to take this from the standpoint of just how humans operate. If you ask him, was he racist, he would say no. Now, regardless of whether you ask him whether or not, if you did a test, you would probably find a certain degree of bias in the way that he goes about his affairs to somebody who's black versus white. African Americans are more likely to get jail time. If I'm not mistaken, I think it was like 4 times more likely to get jail time. If you talk to each and every one of these judges that were part of the process, would they say they were racist? No. If you talk to each and every one of the prosecuting attorneys, would they say they were racist? No. If you talk to the cops, no. Now, you can say some of them are lying, yes, but some of them are also going to experience it not as racism. They're going to experience it to some degree just as the world is, and that their decisions are being fair and earnest. Oh, I mean, come on, this guy just had a rough time, he has a difficult childhood, etc., etc. They will give him the benefit of the doubt that they may not necessarily give the African American. If you remember that criminal, terrorist that went shooting up those places and the cops took the guy for like Burger King or something. If it was black, he would have been shot. Take this back to the case for the moment. You have an FBI agent that is clearly has a perspective and a point of view associated with Hillary and associated with Trump. And that person is working on both investigations, and that person is instrumental in getting one investigation watered down while at the same token getting another one turned up. I'm just saying, let's be honest about what we're talking about. Even if Strzok doesn't want to own up to the fact that I had this overwhelming bias and I actively went and completely cheated and all this other stuff, let's be honest that the very fact that he has certain opinions and harbors certain beliefs will affect how he goes about his affairs, even if it does so around the margins. Those margins was enough to get Hillary Clinton watered down, the case against her watered down, while at the same token stoking more into the case with Trump. That's kind of the point I'm making, Trudy. Whether you want to think Strzok did something overt is a little bit kind of besides the point to me. I care more about the political biases that are associated with the way people go about their affairs. And if Strzok is activating in the world or operating in the world where he assumes that Hillary Clinton is going to win, where he assumes that Hillary Clinton is the better candidate, did you hear the shit he was talking about Bernie Sanders? The primaries hadn't even finished yet. Strzok had already given her the presidency. That's called bias. He had a certain political disposition. And while working on a case that disposition was clear and that disposition was on display. And coming back behind later on saying that wasn't the case is a little laughable. It's a little laughable. Is that the face you lied to your wife with? The FBI is not sending Congress their best people. They're killers, they're drug dealers, they're rapists, and some, I assume, are good people. Well, they're also, swingers. They also cheat on their wives. And they also help getting Hillary Clinton off. Robert Pouquet, corruption is catastrophe. The fourth commoners know justice. 99.7% of those FISA warrants are approved. That's terrifying. What that means for the most part is if an FBI or if a police officer wanted to somehow put a warrant on you, the judge, 99.7% of the times would do it. Well, let's say the FBI wants to do it. This is supposed to be used primarily for terrorism, and this ends up being used for things that go beyond the scope of terrorism. This is a problem. Now, I would wish Congress would delve into that a little bit more so, but they're not. They're focusing more so on Strzok, as if the issue is the person and not necessarily the system to which the person is operating in. Either way, he's shifty as all hell. Strzok is shifty as all hell. Trudy, I understand what you mean, but come on. You understand what I'm getting at here. Strzok does not have to be completely and overtly messing around with the case in order to have a bias that is propelling him to take certain actions. I assume the worst when I'm dealing with people from the standpoint of a political thing. I only assume that way because regardless of what they intellectually want, the emotion is primary. The intellect is going to somehow being guided by the emotions of the individual. If Strzok full on, which he clearly was in the camp for Hillary, completely against Trump, those things will affect his decision. Those things will color the decisions that he makes in these investigations. That being said, the quote of saying we should have done more is terrifying. I know you think that's somewhat of a saving grace. That's not a saving grace. Either he's saying we should have intervened more, which is terrifying, or he's throwing that out there to kind of to cover his tracks. But either way, taking that to the side for the moment, people are guided, colored by their emotions. He's a person. He's no different. It's just so happened that he's in the FBI working on 2 dramatically important cases. And I think he's dirty. Check my Valium. Dave Valium, check your Valium. Let's see. Let me make sure I need to check my Valium. I check it because sometimes it drops during if I'm talking to somebody or something like that. Trudy, I get your point, and I'm making the same one. These biases affect every agent in their performance in cases by the explanation presented by Jamal. Yes, that's what I'm getting at. If personal bias makes someone trustworthy, then no one is trustworthy, JT. No. No, that's not fair, Trudy. Let me ask you this. If I'm doing a case, and I'm trying to be somewhat fair in regards to doing the case, I'm looking at things from a humanitarian disposition. That's my bias. When a person is, I would imagine, an FBI agent, it's not every case where they have something where they're looking at this from a complete way where they are going to be dramatically affected by the outcome. Meaning, Clinton or Trump. The bias that I want them to be somewhat biased towards the law. But in this case, he had a clear bias. He thought Trump was going to be the end of the world. And he's working on both cases. I'm saying that's a problem. I'm also saying that that's not necessarily true for each and every person who walks the earth. Yes, each and every person is a bias, but those biases are, those things go in a spectrum. Not every person was going to be dirty in this way. But yes, every person has to some degree of bias. I don't think there's any person that's completely objective. I don't know if there's objectivity exists at all. Those things are some degree in the spectrum. What I'm saying is, in this very specific case, with this very specific guy, Strzok, his text messages get across a person who had very clearly thought was working in a world that Hillary Clinton was going to win. Comey himself was working in the world where Hillary Clinton was going to win. We know that Comey was told to change how he talked to the public, saying that he acquiesced to this. This is not us making this up. This is literally what was taking place. This is stuff that's already on the record. Now, I agree with you that Republicans are hacks. They are, all of them. All of them want to protect Trump to some degree. But you also have to agree with me that those Democrats also are trying to protect Clinton. And they're trying to put a knife and cover his ass to the degree that they can cover it. The problem with the agent was using government devices. Abe Sand, Trudy. But Obama and Lynch pulled the strings. Okay, fair enough. I don't know that, but fair enough. Fair enough. Look, just so we're clear on what my position is here, there should be a second investigator, second prosecutor to investigate it. If we're to believe that the person, Robert Mueller, is supposed to be fair and earnest and everything else, okay, then that means, at least based on that logic, that you can get a secondary prosecutor that is also supposed to be fair and all this other stuff. Then what is the argument against looking into that case, the investigation of Clinton, and looking into the investigation of Clinton, if that makes sense? Meaning looking into the investigation itself and doing an actual investigation. The IG report was somewhat limited in scope to which the IG went. But the IG report clearly gets across that there is no way to know whether or not the investigation into Clinton's email thing was just. There's no way to know. And from the standpoint of bias, it was all over the place. I don't like Strzok. He's shifty to me. Comes across as extremely shifty to me. Iran-Contra never touched Reagan, but the investigation did bring many people down. Pat Hacker, yes it did. Yes it did. Democrat Stockholm Syndrome is real. I am Siler. Laura Glenny, that totally sucks, Perseus. Unsanctioned studios are overly idealistic. Laws need to be changed so that the assumption as everyone is biased, not the saving face bullshit pretending everyone can suspend it. Yeah, agreed. Look, my assumption, I am cynical on this. I assume that the people are biased actors. I assume it. None of this shallow, we're all gentlemen working for the best and integrity nonsense. Nonsense. This is politics. That stuff doesn't apply. That stuff is only used for essentially political theater of sorts. The reality of it is people function through bias. That's not a constant, but I am talking about from the standpoint of political actors where you have all of the stuff weighing on them, whether you have this kind of corporate interest, whether you have money, or in this case, where you're trying to protect the ass of one of your other political figures. In this case, Hillary Clinton. Democrats interrupted Gowdy the entirety of this question. And you have to ask this point of, why are you interrupting him to this degree? And why are you trying to protect this guy to this degree? He was fired from his particular case, not fired from the FBI, but they kicked him off the case because he was biased. He's trying to say it was just a perception of bias, whatever. He was biased. And you could see it all through the case. Now, my issue here is not so much that, like human beings can be biased, but let's not pretend that you weren't. And let's not pretend that you didn't have a dog in the hunt. Let's not pretend that you clearly wanted Clinton to win, that you were clearly terrified of Donald Trump. And let's not pretend that that in any way would seep into the decision-making process. I try to use this point of African Americans and cops because I try to get across this thing that, do you know that when they were doing tests, they were doing studies, African Americans get less pain medication than whites? It's fucking amazing. The assumption of the white doctors, or the assumption of the doctors treating them, tend to lean towards they're pain seeking or they're faking it more so than what they would do for somebody who was white. It's true, apparently, blew me away. Same thing. If you had a hand model and you were looking at something that was a black hand versus a white hand, not seeing a face, not having anybody talking, the white hand model gets more views or gets more attention. it's true. These things, there's certain things drilled into us. When my wife and I were planning the trip, Africa never came up. Didn't occur to me. To me, Africa were essentially a bunch of babies, hungry, with flies around them, sucking onto a mother's nipple who also has flies around her, with Sally Struthers withholding a ham sandwich in order to get the best shot. I grew up with that image in my head of Africa. That was my image of Africa. So it never occurred to me to even put it on the trip list. We're going to Kenya. But I'm trying to make this point that these things, just because we don't necessarily intellectually recognize it, doesn't necessarily mean it's there. And that's me being extremely generous. Extremely generous. Because I think this guy's a lying asshole, and I think he did have something to do more than just this unconscious bias associated with it. But I'm trying to make the point that even if he was not necessarily acting overtly, let's not pretend that bias doesn't influence behavior. In the same way that you can have a cop who looks at two exact situations, and in one, he may give him a ticket and let him go on his way, and the other one gets tased. The other one gets a trip to the paddy wagon. Bias is built into the process. If you ask the cop, was he racist? He'll say, no way am I racist. I'm just doing my job. I propose to you that even on the best reading of what's taking place with Strzok, the bias influences behavior. That would be my argument. Jamal, history of elections spy on each other and theatrical propaganda warring to make their constituents happy of their investments. Thus, FBI agents and employees are in the game or squeezed. Yeah, agreed. Trudy, he didn't assign himself to both investigations. No, but he definitely took advantage of the fact that he was. You must understand me, Trudy. I don't necessarily think that he had godlike abilities. I don't think that. What I think is he took advantage of the situation to which he found himself. And there were some cases where he trended towards downplaying stuff, and other cases upplaying it. So when we were working on the Clinton investigation, he downplayed it. It was less important to him. It was less relevant. Working on Trump investigation, Trump is going to eat babies. We need to do something about this. He was instrumental in both. This is kind of what I'm getting at. I don't even think that's in question. He was absolutely instrumental in watering down the language for the Clinton case, which got Clinton off. Clinton should have been perp walked. It is hard to reconcile that. I'm sorry, it is. If in one case the woman should have been perp walked and she got off, then I have to ask the question, who let her off and why? And then the moment that you look up and that same person is also on a case with her political opposition, they don't have anything to show for it. But they can scream about it for 2 years since there's something with Trump and Russia. I get suspicious and it smells. It smells. Completely smells. Skip Rock. Trump is holding his rallies in packed houses. Hillary sat at home while she pooped her pants during the campaign. Well, Lynch let her off. Yes, Lynch let her off. Agreed. We agree. Long as we agree on that point, that there's something that stinks here. Look, I don't have, I'm not omnipotent from the standpoint of what happened. That's true. What I would say is something stinks. So let's just agree that something in this process, whether it's him, whether it's Comey, whether it's Lynch, some amalgam of what was taking place there stinks. And it should be investigated. That's all I'm saying. That's my only point. Nobody should be getting Clinton off rim shot. I don't know in Sanctuary Studios. I don't know, man. Powerful women. There'll be guys who are out there sucking Clinton's toes. Dave Minuni. How are you left or of Wolf, and what does that look like? Oh, you mean left of Richard Wolff? I don't know if I'm left of Richard Wolff. I don't know how far left Wolf is. I just know he's a Marxist. I don't know how far that Marxist goes. For all I know, we might be on the same page. I mean, look, I love Richard Wolff. He's a lovable Marxist. And the reason why I say that is America has this idea of socialism, and they get so stuck on the ism as opposed to what is it doing? Like, what are you trying to accomplish? Fuck what it's called. What are you trying to accomplish? If your goal is to, hey, let's make sure people have health care. All right, let's do it. I don't care what it's called. Let's do it. If that's what you want to do, let's do it. How do you want to have do you want to have a better society? All right. How do you do that? I don't care what it's called. Let's just do it. Now, I suspect that Richard Wolff, look, rules for radicals. You have to talk to people where they are. Richard Wolff does a really good job at talking to people where they are because he can explain it and get it across in a way that's real world, physical matter, reality, the phenomena to which they realize and for the area to which they exist. Whatever you want to call it. See, the problem is isms. Like people get so weirded out by what it's called. I don't give a shit what it's called. It depends on how far Richard Wolff is. I mean, is he classical in the sense of Marxism, where the government fades away, you end up with just this kind of free society, where the government becomes minimized because the need of the government becomes less because the contradictions between the classes fade away? I don't know. I don't know if it's that classic state and what is it called? State and Capitalism, the book by Lenin. I don't know how classical of a Marxist he is. So I don't know. I don't know. Richard Wolff is awesome though. But if you're trying to be an asshole, fuck off, Vincent Lloyd. We focus on labels too much, right? Who the fuck cares if you're trying to help others do for good, then proceed? You said he was a capitalist. Who are you talking about, Richard Wolff? Richard Wolff is not a capitalist. He's a Marxist. Well, depends on what you mean. Everybody, to some degree, is stuck in a capitalist system. But he studies Marxism. He's a person. I don't like calling people ist. Just because I said I hate Trump's guts and I said that I think Trump stinks does not mean I bear any grudges against the clown and chief. right. Joe Biden. Just because I said I hated him doesn't necessarily mean I had any bias against him. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. All right, I'm going to end this. That testimony went extremely long. I think that was like a 30-minute clip from the standpoint of testimony for what's his name? Philosophical wisdom. To me, when the Dems got caught cheating and essentially attacked our democracy, they cheated. They created Russiagate to shut the focus from themselves. Yeah, I got to be honest. To me, Democrats can go fuck themselves with the Russiagate stuff. You are the ones that attacked democracy. You are the ones that cheated Sanders. This Russiagate stuff is nonsense, and I strongly suspect it's most likely a cover for the cheating of Sanders. There should be a second prosecutor for Clinton. That's where I'm at. That's where I'm at. So I'm going to end this here. Jim Garrison. Thank you, Jim Garrison. Leave a comment, Jim. I like it when you guys leave comments. Let's see. I think I got everybody. Joshua Renshaw, Trudy, and yeah, Trudy. I don't think we're that far apart on this. I'm not racist, but I hate. Yeah, pretty much. Skip. pretty much. I'm not racist, but I'm not feeling too hot about those colors. Yeah. Nicholas Martinez, can't you have bias on a situation but still not act on your biases? Nicholas Martinez, yes. Yes, it's not impossible. It's not impossible. But let's be honest, that is not the easiest thing to do, especially when you don't necessarily have... Let's say it this way. If you believe that Donald Trump is going to end America, what do you do? Just be honest. What do you do? You're an FBI agent. You're working on a case. You think Hillary Clinton is going to get off anyway. You don't believe she's going to get convicted. You think she's going to be president of the United States. You let her off. You're not doing an investigation that thoroughly. So, fair enough. Now you get an investigation with Trump. You think he's going to eat babies. You think he's going to kick puppies. You think he's going to grind up the testicles of infants and put it into a milkshake and then drink it every morning. That's what you think is going to take place with Donald Trump. Do you act on it? Let's say you don't act on it overtly. Are you telling me that every sense of you is purged when you're making decisions, when you're making these close, tight-knit decisions on A or B, and sometimes these decisions come down close? Are you telling me that he's going to grind up the testicles of Hispanic immigrant kids and drink them for breakfast every morning as a protein shake. You're telling me that that in no way will affect your opinion as an FBI agent. I'm telling you it does. In the same way that it affects the way cops engage with African Americans, I am saying it does. Bias operates. Now, it's not necessarily that everybody is overtly affected by it, but I'm saying in cases where it is a tremendous weight or tremendous negative that you believe is going to take place, I think it is natural as natural can be to have it in you. Now, the question becomes, is a person acting on it? I would say it would probably... Look, I don't buy this argument that Strzok was innocent. So let's just put that right there. But given the greatest benefit of the doubt and the greatest latitude, yes, bias exists. And it was very clear in his text messages that he had a clear disposition in this. Now, the question becomes, is it just him? Does it go to Comey? Does it go to Obama? Does it go to Lynch? That's what the question is. And the only way you're going to answer that question is an investigation. That's all. That's all I'm saying. All right. Pat Hacker, just want to say one more thing about Iran-Contra. It's sad that someone like Oliver North is now the media consultant on mainstream media. Right, this won't mean much to many, but I find it extremely strange. Pat, I don't know if many people even remember the Iran-Contra affair, but yeah, the idea... I remember when those hearings were taking place. I was a kid, but I remember day after day after day, Oliver North giving his testimony. Or maybe it's not day after day, but I remember distinctly Oliver North giving his testimony on that. It wasn't a black and white television, but it was that hazy colored television, where the television wasn't crisp colors. It was a hazy look. I remember this man. He was tarnished. This wasn't a person who you would go to for political advice, and the idea that he's now some kind of coming back as in any way in politics is stunning. It really is. Yeah, that's why Democrats are blocking questions. Tabitha Enriquez, and they are absolutely blocking those questions. Have you seen that? I mean, they're acting frenetic. I mean, they're in this amazing frenzy where they're not letting Trey asking basic questions. They're blocking it all. They're blocking it all. All right, Ollie North should have never been able to show his face on television, or even in public, for that matter. Well, you feel pretty strongly about that, sanctions. You feel pretty strongly about that. Uh-oh. And to think Bernie's sheepdogs for these dirty Democrats. Yes, he does. Yes, he does, Father. These sheepdogs. All right, guys. It's 4:13 in the morning. I'm going to call it a day. That's a fuckfest. That's a fuckfest. If this guy is as innocent as you say he is, Democrats would not need to behave in this way. They would not need to behave in this way. And this is, you know, I understand that there's sometimes where it's like these guys are acting suspicious and everything else. This is an investigation. They're calling it a conspiracy theory, but they're calling it a conspiracy theory because they don't necessarily want to have this particular investigation. The conspiracy theory is the Russia stuff. They've shown nothing. They've gone for 2 years showing nothing. Now, they're inquiring as to what were you using? Who were the people involved with bringing this case up? And think about it in this way. If somebody wrote an article, wouldn't you necessarily want to know who wrote the article? I mean, yes, you would interrogate the position itself also, but wouldn't you also want to know who's writing the article? It gives you to some degree a certain amount of credibility of what's being written. If Alex Jones was writing, talking about lizard people, are you going to look at the lizard people and not necessarily question who's it coming from as opposed to somebody else? Like, I give you an example. Alex Jones does video. In that video, he's talking about aliens. And he's talking about aliens coming to Earth and some kind of communication between aliens and human beings, meaning the government. People will look at that and say, Alex Jones is saying that this is nonsense. Say for the moment that the United States government officially comes out and says the exact same thing. Yes, you interrogate what's being said, but you also interrogate the person that's saying it because you invest a certain amount of credibility in the witness. Same thing with this. You guys have an investigation, all right? Fair enough. What is the context that the investigation took? Who was involved in the investigation? What were the other investigations that the person was involved in? Was there any, let's say, corruption or any oddities associated with the previous investigations that the person was involved in? If there were oddities associated with the previous investigation, what were those oddities related to? I'm just asking just a basic train of thought here. So yeah, Strzok should be questioned. He should be investigated. And just based on the IG report, in and of itself, there should be a second investigation open up into, I guess, a full, more thorough investigation of what took place from the standpoint of the Clinton investigation, meaning Comey's investigation, but also a real investigation of those emails. Yes, I'm annoyed by that to some degree because I feel like if there was anybody else, they would be under a prison right now. She was able to walk. She was able to walk. So I'm going to end this. All right, guys. Thank you guys for joining me on this. I ran out of 420 Abel's philosophical ones. So maybe I do 420. Maybe I want to do 420. It's 416. All right, I'm going to end this, and I'm going to try to come up with a 420 between now and actually at 420. So if you guys enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe. You can always support the Patreon. I'll be back and trying to be back in like 3 minutes. 3 minutes. Thanks, guys.